Today we're going to be breaking down my snowboard leg, all the components that go into it, and make it a little bit different than my everyday leg and make it so that I can do the things that I love to do. So since it's almost December and it's snowing today finally in Utah, but we'll see once we get a little bit of a decent snowpack, maybe we'll be able to get some turns out there, but just maybe going through a little bit of snow withdrawal. That's, like I've talked about, that's my outlet and a place that I can kind of go to think, and also a place that I can go to shut my brain off and also, get back into feeling like who I was before I lost my limb, or just connecting back with, being an athlete and those types of things. So I just wanted to talk about my snowboard leg because I've spent a lot of time trying to optimize it and make it better, and still have some things I want to do to continue to make it better, and probably always will be. But to start with, we'll start with my knee. So you can see here my knee, I've got some electrical tape on it to hold the shock settings in place and everything else. But my knee is it's called the XT9. So it's a very old knee. And now I think Ottobock owns like the patent on this, or they have a device similar called the ProCarve, which really is kind of the same thing. It has like a lock that allows it to swing. Like you can see, this doesn't swing at all. It is only just this mountain bike shock mounted in this frame, and I have it set up at the angle that I want so that the socket, I can't really pull it when it's sitting on my knee, but the socket bends and returns so that I get, a little bit of pop there, and so I can ride the knee. And the reason why I have this old knee and the way that I got it is actually before I had ever met with a prosthetist. Like I've talked about in videos, like I didn't even know what a prosthetist was, but I bought this knee before I had met with anyone because here in Utah, there's a National Ability Center up in Park City, which is a recreational therapy place that really specializes in helping people get back to winter recreation, but all recreation in general. And I went up there and did a visit again before I met with a prosthetist or anything. I remember I was on crutches and met with the coach of the snowboard team up there. And then a few weeks later, he messaged me and said, "Hey, I have this old knee that they're going to sell it on eBay unless you want to buy it." And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to need that." And so I bought it, and it's been what I've been riding ever since. I've wakeboarded on this knee, I've snowboarded on this knee, I've surfed on this knee. I've tried the Moto knee one time, but that was like early on, and I was by myself, so I didn't really know how to set it up. And I actually have preferred this to that experience. I'm sure if I tried the Moto knee and had Mike there or whoever to set it up or explain some things to me about it, might be a little bit more helpful. But for my style of riding and everything else, like, this knee has been solid for me. I've had the shock rebuilt on the inside a few times so that it is returning even faster, and it's been solid for me. I know what I'm going to get out of it. There's nothing crazy there, but it does what I need it to do. And then down below, I have been fortunate to get the Versa foot. This is the VF1, so this is the foot that goes with the Moto knee, and now there's the VF2, and they're making improvements to that all the time. But I got this foot, I don't know, maybe 3 seasons ago. Before that, I was riding on this foot, which is a Maverick Extreme, which is basically a fiberglass foot. The reason why I chose to ride on fiberglass instead of carbon was because I wanted it to be a little bit more mushy in my boot and not be like this high response. On carbon, that carbon is always just going to be reflecting against you. So with my back leg being my amputated leg, I really need to be able to push into my toes and into my ankle and not get that constant fight backwards to extension. And so that's why I chose a fiberglass foot. But then once I made the upgrade to the Versa foot, which you can see has a shock in it as well, so that you can lean and really get good dorsal and plantar flexion, but it's also kind of resisting you through that as well, so there's something to push into. And so the way that I got this foot was I was up at Brighton Ski Resort here, which is my local resort where I go every day, and I was just walking to the lift, and I like my snow pants, I have my regular pants. My leg is visible. Sometimes I need to make adjustments to the shock. whatever, but it's just helpful for me to see things. And so I was walking to the lift, and a guy came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, I have a Versa foot in my garage." His name was Dom. Dom, if you see this, like, again, thank you so much for this foot, because he just was a military vet and had a couple, had an extra Versa foot sitting in his garage, and he said, "I'm not riding it. You may as well get some use out of it." And it really like took my abilities to the next level. It really changed things for me like overnight, and I've been able to continue improving my riding since getting this foot. So again, shout out Dom. Thank you very much, man. This thing has been a game changer, and it really does. I think that the foot makes more of a difference than the knee even. Like, the knee is great because it is basic, this one specifically, and I really play off of using my foot as much as I can to get movement, which is more natural. Like, really, in snowboarding, you don't want a knee and an ankle, you want an ankle. You want both combined, and so really the foot makes a big difference for me. And then moving up to the socket, so I've played with like so many different types of sockets. When I first started riding, I would just ride in my everyday socket that is sleeve suspension and suction, and it would not take me very long to pop that suspension, like 2 laps maybe. As soon as I'd get a little bit of sweat or get in some deep snow and pull up, I pop that suspension, lose it, and then now I have to like literally undress completely on the side of the hill, dry my limb, and then try to get back into my socket. And it's just a frustrating process. So I went back to my lanyard systems. So you can see here, there's the hole for my proximal attachment, and we'll go into my liner here in a second. And then the distal hole for me to slide that lanyard through and Velcro on. But that helps me understand that I'm locked in better. And so that made a difference. And then I started wearing a test belt, and then I have a test belt that I have a kiss strap on, so I'll tighten it down here below and then really crank it up my waist, so it's almost like I'm getting some suspension out of the test belt as well. And I guess we'll just get to the liner and show that, because I am playing with a Smart Temp liner this year. So this is just a locking Smart Temp liner. You can see Alpha Smart Temp Gel. So it really should be not make a major difference. Right now the biggest issue for me snowboarding is sweat management, and I'm just always going to sweat. Could be -3 degrees out there, but like just walking to the lift, getting everything strapped on, getting up and then getting strapped in again, usually going to be sweating. So managing that is my biggest issue. So that's why I'm trying the Smart Temp liner this year, and we'll get into some other ideas I have here in a second. But so you just see I'd slide in here. If you haven't seen this type of locking system before, there's this strap on the end of my liner, and I'll just slide down into the bottom of that, pull that down all the way so you're down, and then you have this proximal placard, proximal top, and that goes inside on the liner. So I would put this on, after I put the liner on, but before I slid into the socket. And then you pull that out of this hole, and it slides down into this hole, locks in there, and then you take this and slide it up. So now I'd be locked in solid, not coming out of there at all. I've played with sockets that have even 2 lanyards on it, one that is lateral as well, and I think that did make some difference. But another key feature of the socket that I snowboard in that makes it different is that I have the medial wall completely cut in my frame. So there's nothing really holding this part together other than the flexible inner socket here. So I have a flexible inner socket, but my frame obviously has a lot of windows in it. This window for sitting on the lift, and also to keep it as light as possible, because weight is obviously an issue too. But this medial window, along with the test belt wrapped around, gives me a lot of good flex. And so when I land and come down on my back leg especially, I can flex into that socket. It's not too jarring up here in all of these uncomfortable areas. So this gives me the flexibility and stability to really get into like deep squats and things like that without being hindered by my socket. And so it's taken me, like I said, quite a few variations to end up here. And then this socket in particular is also a carbon fiber and fiberglass blend. So again, that fiberglass gives it a little bit more flexibility and strength in that flex, which has been really beneficial. And then towards the end of last year, I made the next version of that, which is this socket. I call it the Leonardo socket. And I rode this thing one day because you could see, where is it here? I broke it. Oh, right here. You can see right there that this piece of carbon is broken. So this socket is a really thin carbon. Like if you look here, you can see that is a pretty thin, I think it was maybe 3 layers of carbon only that I did, and then the green layer. So not super thick, especially for what I was going to do it for, especially having this window open here. But the key difference on this socket compared to that one is that I used a product called Prosaflex. So technically my flexible inner socket, it started to come apart here and delaminate, but you could see like these are all squishy windows because that's my flexible inner socket that is laminated inside. So it's really cool. I took my model, my positive model, and I added the cloth socks and put my PVA on everything, made my hard frame, took everything off, cut the windows out of my socket where I wanted those windows to be, and then laid the cloth back onto my model inside the PVA, and then shoot the Prosaflex resin, and then that creates the soft flexible resin that creates a flexible inner. So it was an experiment the first time, just really trying to see like how that material worked, and I liked it a lot. This socket was definitely comfortable. I mean, this thing snapped. It had to be like run 2 or 3 that day, and I wore it the rest of the day, another 10, 15 runs. And even though it was definitely sloppy, I could feel like something's wrong. It was super comfortable. It was definitely, I noticed a like comfort difference from this to that. And so excited to make this again, a little bit thicker, a little bit stronger, even my flexible inner a little bit thicker. Probably won't use this hexagonal pattern because it didn't clean up very well, obviously. And then what I also want to do is try using a locking suction hybrid system. So, with the locking, I know I'm locked in there, everything else, but I still kind of spin around in the socket sometimes, especially if my test belt is getting a little bit looser, things like that. So like with the Oser has a locking suction system, so does Coyote. I kind of want to get one of those and try, having the locking so I know I'm locked in well, but then maybe having that suction so that I can keep that rotation down to a minimum. And so that's kind of the next iteration of what I'm trying to do with my socket, is make it continue to improve it, which I said, I think I'll always be trying to improve upon my sockets and make them more comfortable, especially for snowboarding. But the next thing for my foot, or my leg in general, is, on my foot, you can see I have this cuff that I've kind of carved out of foam over the years, and it fills out the top of my boot so that I don't have a ton of play there, which some people like having a ton of play in their boot. I don't, and so I want that immediate response, and so that gives me a little bit there. But the next thing I'm kind of working on, because I do just slide it into a regular boot, is getting rid of that. Working with a couple companies, trying to figure out how can we make a Versa foot plate attachment that just goes straight into my binding. And I don't necessarily want to use like step-on bindings or something like that. I still want to strap in, but I want to have something that fills out my bindings and everything like a normal foot, but cuts down on the weight. And so if you look at Solomon and Hopper, which is in America, Proteer is kind of distributing Hopper, but Hopper is its own company in France, I believe. Hopper and Solomon partnered to make their running foot, and it's really nice. I actually got to try that with Hugo, one of the engineers, maybe the engineer, up at Brighton. We did a little walk around, and it was a little bit of snow, a little bit of mud, and it was like pretty impressive to see a blade, walk around, look it up if you haven't seen it, the Hopper blade. But they also have a snowboard foot that is a blade, still carbon, so I'm interested in how that would ride. But they've created like a boot exo frame that goes around the foot, and that's something that I am interested in. Obviously, I want to, like I said, get rid of the weight of the boot and it filling up with snow, all of these different things. So that's a rundown of my snowboard leg, and where I hope that I can continue to improve it to in the future. Looking forward to getting on snow, and again, like all of these things I've kind of scrounged up and had to get from connections or a guy chasing me down in the parking lot, whatever it is, because insurance doesn't approve these things. Insurance says that me snowboarding is not medically necessary, and so they're not going to pay for any of this stuff. So I'm very lucky that I still have the ability to even get secondhand materials and make the most of them and really benefit from it. But a lot of people don't have access to these devices. So the things that they want to do, they want to go back to skiing like they did before, but forget about figuring out how to manage the parking lot and get to the lift and everything. They don't even have access to the device that allows them to do that. So they don't even get to figure out the frustrations at the ski resort that could be made a little bit better for them. That's why So Everybody Can Move is so important, and that's why we all deserve to have access to the things that we love to do and have access to movement, because movement is medicine for sure. So that's it for this week. We'll see you next time.